strangers to Deseret Radio, broadcasting once again from the only station in Zion officially sanctioned by the Brethren, though, admittedly, we have yet to receive a letter confirming such sanction. We assume the silence is approval. We assume the silence is also curious. The desert is restless tonight. The coyotes are speaking, and those who know how to listen have begun taking notes. The stars flickered in strange ways last night. 3 long blinks, then a pause. 3 long blinks, then a pause. The astronomers call it a coincidence. The faithful call it Morse code. And the Deseret Intelligence Agency? They have issued a statement simply reading, "You do not need to know." Saints, it is always comforting to know that they are hard at work. Tonight's message, the Gold Boy speaks. Last night, a message arrived at our station. Not via email, not through the usual drop points in the hollowed-out hymnals, and certainly not by courier pigeon, Brother Enoch. If you're listening, please stop trying. We still have 7 disoriented pigeons in the ceiling vents, and they keep whispering the sacrament prayers at midnight. No, saints. This message was different. It arrived in the form of a seashell. Now, some of you will say, that's not so strange. Seashells exist. Yes, true. Good point. But saints, this particular seashell was found on the Bonneville salt flats. And when held to the ear, it did not play the ocean. It did not echo at all. Instead, it whispered in perfect Adamic, "Come find me." Now, we at Deseret Radio pride ourselves on journalistic integrity, so we did the responsible thing and immediately handed the seashell over to the Deseret Intelligence Agency. They, in turn, did the responsible thing and immediately incinerated it in a 3,000-degree fire while chanting the 13 Articles of Faith backward. But before they could destroy it, one of our interns, Brother Chase, managed to scribble down a transcription of what the shell said. It read as follows. The boy is waiting on the shore. The waves do not touch his feet. His skin gleams in the sun, but there is no sun. He does not blink. He does not breathe. He only listens. And when he speaks, the tide will come. The tide will come. The tide will come. Which is, of course, all well and good, except that there is no tide in Deseret. The ocean is far, far away. The ocean is not ours. And yet, a fisherman near Utah Lake reported seeing something golden standing in the shallows last night. He said it was only for a moment, that he blinked, and it was gone, that when he looked down, the fish in his net had turned to gold, and that when he tried to spend them at the nearest Maverick gas station, the cashier simply smiled and said, "Not yet." So if you see a boy made of gold standing by the water, do not speak to him. Do not meet his gaze. But if he offers you something, if he places a coin, or a fish, or a single golden hair in your hand, well, that's your secret to keep. We reached out to the Deseret Intelligence Agency for comment, and they responded with a single email, which read, "You have been warned. Classic DIA, always helpful." A brief interruption now, dear listeners, to address a matter of grave concern. It has come to our attention that somewhere, out in the dark corners of the airwaves, there is another broadcast, a rogue transmission, a counterfeit. It calls itself Ward Radio. Now, as you all know, Deseret Radio is the only officially sanctioned radio broadcast in the Valley of the Saints. Officially sanctioned by whom, you may ask? A great question. A question we have chosen not to answer. But what is important is that we do not endorse Ward Radio. We do not approve of its so-called alternative viewpoints or its so-called community calendar. And we certainly do not approve of its claim that Deseret Radio is a psyop run by the DIA to control the narrative, which is ridiculous. Deseret Radio would never work for the DIA. Not intentionally, not directly, not technically. But last night, something happened. In the middle of our broadcast, Right between the urgent announcement about the ongoing beehive shortages and Sister Jacobson's Relief Society bake sale, we experienced an interruption. A voice cut through the signal. A voice that did not belong. And this voice, dear listeners, laughed. It was a low, crackling chuckle, like an old bishop who knows a joke is inappropriate but is going to tell it anyway. And then, just as suddenly, the voice whispered, "You're not the only ones watching." Then silence, static. And when our signal returned, the hymn book had changed. Our station copy of the 1985 hymnal, previously in perfect condition, was now missing pages. Entire songs gone, hymns erased as if they had never existed. We reached out to the church distribution center for a replacement, but they informed us that the missing hymns had never been printed in the first place, that they were never part of the book, that there was nothing to replace. But saints, we remember. We remember a hymn that began with the words, "We shall build, though the land forgets." We remember another that warned, "Take no light from false beacons." And we remember a third, though only faintly, that spoke of a gate that must never be opened. Ward Radio, if you can hear us, we have a message for you. Stop. Stop now. We do not wish to escalate this. We do not wish to see what happens if the watchmen decide to respond. And to our listeners, if you hear a voice whispering on your radio that is not your own, turn it off. Do not listen. Do not respond. And whatever you do, do not hum along. Citizens of Deseret, we regret to inform you that the 4th Ward building has vanished. No, not burned down, not abandoned, not repossessed due to a clerical error in tithing funds allocation, though we do recall an unsettling financial report from Brother Haber last month. No, dear listeners, the 4th Ward meeting house is simply gone. Not a brick, not a pew, not a single lingering scrap of families can be together forever, cross-stitching remains. One moment, it stood proudly at the end of Pioneer Lane, doors open in welcome. The next, an empty field, wildflowers, a single folding chair, tipped over as if someone had risen too quickly from a long meeting, the smell of orange rolls on the breeze, but no rolls to be found. Now, some skeptics might say, buildings do not just disappear, to which we say, then where is the 4th Ward? Skeptics might also say, this sounds like a zoning issue, to which we say, then why is the grass in the exact outline of the chapel still bent, as though pressed down by unseen walls? And skeptics might finally say, this is just another insurance scam by the finance clerk, to which we say, Brother Haber was seen staring at the empty lot for 6 full hours last night, his tie uncharacteristically loose, whispering, they finally did it. They finally took one back. Listeners, there are reports, though unverified, that a dim glow can be seen in the shape of the steeple at precisely 3:33 a.m. That if you step into the empty space where the pulpit once stood, you will feel a presence behind you. That last night, a confused deacon was found walking in circles, still clutching his empty sacrament tray, saying, but I was just in there. The Deseret Intelligence Agency has released a brief statement, and by statement, we mean they sent an unmarked envelope to our office containing a single sticky note that read, do not pursue. It was, of course, written in red ink, underlined 3 times. So, dear saints, if you do find yourself near Pioneer Lane, and you do feel the air change, cool, stale, like an indoor hallway with no windows, please exit the area immediately. Do not step into the space where the pews once were. Do not answer if someone inside calls your name. And if you hear the final strains of God Be With You Till We Meet Again, echoing from a building that is no longer there, well, you can sing along to that one. A package arrived at the station this morning. No return address, no postage, just a bundle wrapped in rawhide, bound with a thin strip of braided horsehair. It smelled of whiskey and gunpowder. I inside. A journal. Old. Weathered. Pages yellowed like they had been stored too long in the desert sun. The cover bore the name of Porter Rockwell. Now, saints, there are many things a man of faith should fear. Wolves in the fold. A temple recommend interview with a real seer. But few things unsettle the soul like a missing piece of the past, suddenly returning where it does not belong. The journal's first pages were filled with familiar entries, names, places, accounts of dusty trails and campfire conversations. Nothing unusual for the legendary Porter Rockwell, the destroying angel of Mormonism. That is, until we reached the final entry. The ink was smudged, the writing unsteady, and it read as follows. I have seen the Watchers again. Not the Danites, not the U.S. Marshals. Something else, something older. They stand at the edge of the camp, beyond the firelight, hands folded, eyes hollow, always watching, always waiting. Brigham tells me not to speak of them, that they have been here since before we came, that they will be here when we are gone. But I cannot help but wonder, who do they watch for? Last night they moved. First one, then all at once. Not toward us, but toward the mountains. I followed, though I knew I should not. The air smelled of honey and blood. The earth was warm underfoot, and when I reached the canyon mouth, I saw them kneeling in a circle, their heads bowed, their voices speaking words I could not hear. In the center stood a boy. He was golden. He turned to me, and I swear he smiled. And then I woke. The fire had burned low. My horse was unsettled. My gun was missing. And when I looked to the canyon, there were no footprints but my own. I have served the Lord as best I can. But if I see those men again, I do not know if I will follow. I do not know if I will wake. The rest of the journal is blank. Scholars have long debated Porter Rockwell's life, his deeds, his faith, his uncanny ability to walk through gunfire unscathed. But never before has there been mention of the Watchers, of the boy made of gold, of a moment so unsettling that the destroying angel himself chose not to act. So the question remains, was this a dream, a warning, a memory, or saints? Is it a message, one that was never meant to be read? We've taken the journal to the ward librarian. Brother Lindstrom has been running the 4th Ward Library for nearly 4 decades. He knows which copies of the Miracle of Forgiveness have had pages quietly glued together. He has memorized the microfilm archives and once correctly identified a lost pioneer diary by smell alone. So we placed the journal on his desk and asked him, Brother Lindstrom, what do you make of this? He did not look up. He did not blink. He simply closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and whispered, Take it back. Back where? We asked. Where it belongs, he said. Now, as you all know, the bees of Deseret are more than just a humble militia/honey production cooperative. They are the first and last line of defense between Zion and whatever lurks just beyond the veil of the Wasatch. And last night, they issued a new order. It was delivered in the form of a single bee, which landed gently on our station manager's forehead, buzzed 3 times in what experts believe to be perfect rhythm, and then perished in a tiny burst of golden flame. The message? No more corn syrup. Now, the implications of this are vast. The bees of Deseret have long been known to tolerate the presence of processed sugars among the saints, begrudgingly, with tight-lipped silence, but tolerate nonetheless. But something has changed. Something has made them unwilling to abide it any longer. This morning, Sister Peterson's Relief Society caramel corn vanished from the potluck table before a single bite could be taken. The empty bowl was found outside the chapel, filled with beeswax. No one saw who or what removed it. The primary children's fruit snacks, replaced entirely by raw honeycombs. The vending machine in the steak center. Every soda can now bears a hand-carved label reading only, "Choose ye this day." The bees are serious saints. Brother Wilkes, an amateur apiarist and part-time alarmist, has begun carrying a jar of royal jelly in a holster and has challenged 3 men to duels over their continued use of artificial sweeteners. The Deseret Intelligence Agency has yet to respond to our inquiries on whether this marks an official change in policy, though we did receive an email from a DIA operative under the pseudonym Worker B113 that simply read, "You would do well to obey." So, dear listeners, if you find yourself reaching for a bottle of store-brand honey, take caution. If you wake to find a single bee resting on your nightstand, consider it a gentle warning. And if you should open your cupboard and find all of your processed sugar replaced with neatly labeled jars of Deseret clover honey, well, welcome to the hive. Listeners, something unprecedented has occurred. The Deseret Intelligence Agency, long known for their cryptic warnings, ambiguous threats, and complete refusal to acknowledge literally anything, has taken action. This morning, an unmarked black vehicle pulled up outside our station. It had no license plates. It had no visible driver. And yet, when the door opened, a man stepped out. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, black tie, and an immaculately pressed suit that did not wrinkle when he moved. He did not introduce himself. He did not blink. He simply handed us an envelope and said, "This is your briefing." Then he stepped backward into the car and vanished. Not drove away, not pulled out of the parking lot. Vanished. The vehicle remained for several minutes, doors closed, engine silent, before dissolving into a fine mist, which was rude because it left a horrible smell in the break room. Now, dear saints, we opened the envelope. Of course we did. We are journalists, after all. Inside was a single typewritten document, labeled "Classified for internal use only," which, obviously, means we are going to read it aloud right now. It reads, "To all authorized operatives, Phase 1 has begun. The patterns have shifted. The alignments are complete. The watchmen have taken position. The signal has been sent. Ward radio has been identified as an unapproved transmission. The source has not yet been located. Efforts are ongoing. The Golden Boy has surfaced. This was expected. The 4th Ward was taken. This was not expected. Anomalous artifacts have appeared in multiple locations. Porter Rockwell's journal was not to be found. It is imperative that it be recovered immediately. If it has fallen into the hands of unauthorized persons, containment protocols must be enacted. Repeat, containment protocols must be enacted. So, saints, that is new. To summarize, the DIA is officially acknowledging everything: the watchman, the boy, ward radio, the lost chapel, and Porter Rockwell's journal, which, reminder, is still sitting in our break room. Containment protocols. What does that mean? Who took the 4th Ward? Is the DIA actually competent, or did they just get spooked into action by a spectral cowboy's diary? We don't know. We never know. And finally, saints, a small but urgent matter. Someone, or something, has been going around town, whispering. It started in a Deseret book. A woman browsing the clearance section heard it, low, deliberate, just behind her ear. "Do you know Hoss?" She turned, expecting a kindly employee or possibly an overly friendly ward member. But there was no one, just a display of discounted CTR rings. The largest size was missing. At the Orem Costco, a man stopped mid-sample, halfway through chewing a cube of pre-cooked ham. He looked around. Nobody near him, but the whisper had been there, just over his shoulder, just close enough to feel. "Do you know Hoss?" He left immediately, did not return his cart, did not finish his ham. This afternoon, outside the Jordan River Temple, a bride stepped out and paused. "Do you know Hoss?" she murmured, almost as if in response. But when asked what she had heard, she only frowned and said, "Nothing. Never mind. I must have imagined it." Then she smiled, took her husband's hand, and walked toward the parking lot. But the photographer swears the first picture he took of them, the very first one, shows only the groom. So, dear listeners, if you hear the question, if you feel the breath at the nape of your neck, if you almost catch the whisper but not quite, don't look around. Don't check. Don't acknowledge it. Because whatever it is, it's getting closer. Good night, Deseret, and may the desert keep you.